It's been 9 years since Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. Some called it the biggest land grab in Europe since World War II. Now, Moscow had expressed concern about ethnic Russians in Crimea and described the move as an act of self-determination. It began in February 2014 when the then president, Viktor Yanukovych, fled Kyiv for Russia. Ukraine's parliament appointed an acting president and prime minister and made it clear it wanted closer ties with Europe. Almost immediately, pro-Russian separatists began occupying major facilities and checkpoints on the Crimean Peninsula. The following month, the Russian soldiers secured the region, and on March the 18th, Crimean and Russian officials signed the Treaty of Accession to the Republic of Crimea to Russia. Putin ratified it 3 days later. Well, joining me now in studio is Christina Pashchin. She's the assistant professor at Northwestern University here in Qatar. She's also the director of the documentary A Struggle for Home, the Crimean Tatars. Good to have you with us.
Thank you so
on
much.
The programme. When you began making the film, obviously it was, just a year or several months after the annexation of Crimea. When you make a film, you do it to educate, inform or entertain, or your detractors would perhaps say it's a propaganda tool. What were your reasons for making the film?
Sure. Well, I actually began making it in 2012, way before the invasion and annexation. And I was trying to tell the story of their history, but also the discrimination and the bigotry they experienced from Ukrainian people and also from primarily Russian nationalists on the peninsula. And then when 2014 happened, obviously my angle had to change. And then it became really an educative tool to talk about the history of the Crimean Tatars, their tragic colonialism they've experienced under Russian occupation for centuries at this point, and currently what's happening now since the annexation and their ongoing human rights persecutions against them.
How important was it to tell the story from the Tatars' point of view? They've been, you might say, the ping-pong ball between two great sides.
It was imperative to tell their point of view. They are the indigenous population of Crimea. Their roots go back as far as 500 BC. If you think about they're an amalgam of very many different ethnic groups from ancient history on the peninsula. And as you said, they have been this ping pong ball. When Catherine the Great annexed their country, their state, the Crimean Khanate in 1783, they've suffered population displacement for centuries, bigotry, their mosques have been vandalized, their houses have been destroyed, their culture has been decimated. And when the Soviet Union collapsed in the 90s, here they thought they're finally free. They're finally free of Russia, they finally have their freedom, and then boom, 2014 happened, and it's starting all over again. Now, under Russian occupation, under Putin, the same things are happening. We have Crimean Tatars who are being pushed out of the peninsula, forced to flee to Turkey or to other European countries. They've had their representative bodies, the Majlis and the Kurultai, they're banned from the peninsula now. Their TV channels have been banned from the peninsula. Their cultural institutions are being decimated once again. And now we're talking about this mass mobilization that Putin called for Russian citizens, right? That had disproportionately targeted Crimean Tatars in the peninsula. So once again, we're seeing like these remnants of the genocidal policies Russia has perpetrated against them for centuries.
When you document the lives of people or the lives of a community, it's hard not to be impassioned and get connected to that community itself. So when you saw and documented the sanctions upon Russia in 2014 from the EU and from the US, were they hard enough, in your opinion?
Oh, no, definitely not. And we see that the result of that now with the invasion of mainland Ukraine in last year, in 2022. If the sanctions had been hard enough, if the international community had been tough enough on Putin then, when they tried to take over Crimea, I don't think this would have been happening now. But on the flip side, in some ways, the war has had a positive element in that there's real confidence now that Ukraine will be able to liberate and take back Crimea. I don't think you saw that sentiment before this war began. Now we're really seeing that hope happening, and even American generals talking about that maybe Ukraine really does have a chance of getting back Crimea. And if that's the case, the Crimean Tatars are going to be free again.
Lots of documentaries or even films, I mean, I tend to think of something like The Killing Fields, Oscar-winning, to tell us about Cambodia and what happened there, as a great educational tool. Is the art of documentary making as strong today? You're just one particular university, but as it has been for decades across media schools across the world, I mean, you tend to connect with those media schools. What's your general impression of the way they're telling the story of what history is all about?
What history is about. I think the programs are still strong. We're seeing, unfortunately, a lot of platforms are focusing on true crime stories, right, or kind of more entertainment value. But I think the educative historical documentaries are still important, and I still think there is that kind of hunger for them to be produced. And that's why I chose to make this film, because a lot of people don't know who the Crimean Tatars are, and they're so imperative and so influential in world history.
Yeah, and you can, of course, see that documentary on the Al Jazeera website, A Struggle for Home, the Crimean Tatars. Christina Patchen, nice to have you in the studio.
Much.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.